Alright, welcome back to Roguetech, and welcome back to your first playthrough. So, we have selected our drop locations, we are looking at the Vanguard across the water, our allies are safely on the other side of the map, about to rejoin us at the center with the base that we are defending. I'm going to click the confirm button, and in we go. Now, a lot just happened. We're going to break it all down. As soon as stuff stops moving around, we're going to break it all down. Alright. So, the first thing that happened, obviously, was our mechs and vehicle appeared. Since it's a defend base, we are already here defending the base. But you will also sometimes see drop pod animations, mostly in the cities, where a little cluster falls to the ground and then opens up and there's the mech or vehicle. Or you'll see a drop ship fly in, drop people off, and then fly away. Now, immediately after that, you saw it popped up saying enemy activation or enemy turn and then neutral. So, our enemies over here, we do not have enough sensor information to know exactly what order they're moving in, what turn order they are, what initiative order they are. But we do know that one has already moved, and it is this Scorpion. And you can tell that it was the one that moved because its little question mark hex is darker. So if you look at the yellow jacket, it's that brighter red. That means it has not yet activated this round. Meanwhile, the Scorpion is the darker red inside of the hex. So it has already activated. The neutrals refers to the VTOLs here, which apparently when the vehicles arrive at the point, the VTOLs are gonna start helping us? Question mark? So instead of turrets, we got helos. That's fine. That's fine. I don't remember it working that way, but whatever. Yeah, previously, in previous iterations of Roguetech, whatever. That's in the past. So, we are trying to wait for these vehicles, the Swiftwind and the J. Edgar, which is actually fine. So, okay, I just did that without even thinking about it, but that's worth noting. If you right-click on a unit, on any unit, this entire display appears above it. And this will tell you everything you know about that unit, which faction it belongs to, what initiative it is, if you know it, how much evasion it has, every effect that's currently affecting it, its entire weapon loadout, and if you hover over the different sections, at the top it'll be its total structure and armor, and if you hover over a particular location, it'll show that location's structure and armor, as well as every component that's in that particular location. Now, the reason I started showing you the allied vehicle is because this is what it looks like when you have perfect sensor information. You can also look at the Mechwarrior, our pilot name. It's a private, which means very low skills and nothing really special, but there are a lot of different specialty, what determines what they're called is either if it's just a regular Mechwarrior or pilot that has certain skills from, or perks from the skills leveling up. There's different terms, different designations for each combination possible. I'll talk more about the designations and the skills and perks later. That's where you'll see, again, if you have a good enough sensor check on the person, you can even see what kind of person is piloting the vehicle or mech. However, if you don't have the sensor information, actually we have decent sensor information there. Interesting. Why? Why do we have so much information on them? Interesting. Well, there will be times where you don't have the sensor information, and you get essentially nothing. Well, then again, okay, we do have a little bit. So, the Scorpion here. We don't have enough sensor information to know what this energy weapon is, what the missile weapons are. We just know it has 2 energy and 2 missile. It also won't show us what's in the locations, but we can see how much armor and structure max the locations have, because we have enough sensor information to see the maximum values of the armor and structure. We do not have enough sensor information to know exactly how much there is, but we can see the bars showing that this is just under 80% of its structure in the left torso. So, you can do the quick math, 65, 80%. I'm not going to, in part because my brain is mush. But you'll also notice it has 8 evasion, and the Yellow Jacket and Woodpecker and Vespa have 6. The reason they have 6 when they haven't activated yet is called spawn protection. So the first round of combat, everyone, like all of the enemies start with spawn protection, and I'm pretty sure your allies do as well. Yes, your allies do as well. But you start with just braced. But it doesn't really matter because the first round of combat is just a repositioning round. In previous iterations of Roguetech, there was actually hot drops where people could start shooting at each other on the first round, but that was changed, I think mostly just as a balancing factor, because there were builds that you could set up where you would just kill everything through spawn protection, and there were other times where you would just land on the battlefield with your back to the enemy and get one shot before you could activate. So I very much prefer the first round is for repositioning, system. But yeah, you'll see on the left the 10 rounds until reinforcements arrive. This is going to tick down at the end of each round, and the end of each round, if I just press escape to close out of that extra information from whatever unit I was selecting, the initiative bars at the top go to 30. So it starts with initiative 1, and it goes all the way to initiative 30. Or backwards, reverse. It starts with initiative 30, and it goes all the way to initiative 1. There are 30 stages, is what I'm trying to say. And at the end, once it counts down all the way, the next round will start. So any effects that last until the end of the round, or for X number of rounds, will end whenever the whenever the countdown reaches to 1 and then rolls over to 30. That's a new round. Oh, right, the chevrons up here, or I guess chevron. Is it still a chevron if it's pointing down instead of up? I think it is. There might be a different term for it, but I'm just going to call them all chevrons. The white ones are your units. The blue ones are allied units. The red ones are enemy units. And the gray ones are neutral units. If there are 2 different enemy factions, because there are missions where the enemies will fight each other, there's a completely different symbol. It's still going to be red, showing you that it's an enemy, but it's not a chevron. It's a completely different symbol for whenever there is a third party that is also fighting. You do not know, just looking at the bar up here, which unit is at which initiative point. But for your units, you can see, because it's on both the model pointing up, you'll see the stealth there, the 10 inside of the hexagon. So at initiative 10, Huldra will activate, but you can also see it over the Mechwarrior's portrait. So at 10, initiative 10, Huldra will be able to activate. The bars that are underneath each Mechwarrior's portrait is their health. So Tainted Loki has max health of 3, so that's why there's 3 gray bars underneath it. Whereas I think everyone else has 4. Yeah, everyone else has 4. There's also 6 portrait slots, and if you have additional forces, if you have beyond 6, there will be a button to swap to the additional forces beyond the first 6. Oh, right. Also, the Yellow Jacket here, we can see it as a Yellow Jacket YJ58, whereas the Woodpecker and the Vespa, we just know it's a Woodpecker and a Vespa. That again is because of sensor roll. It's an entire subsystem to determine how much information you have about the target. And I think we'll get into that in tomorrow's video whenever we actually take our first activation. Our first combat activation. So, also the bouncing chevron over Sarge here is telling us that it is her turn. She is the unit we have. Oh, actually it is still here whenever you don't have a second lance. It just doesn't do anything. In any case, so the chevron was pointing at Sarge, and you can actually back out with the escape key. And that's just telling you which of your units is actually activating in this initiative turn. And if you have multiple units that can activate at the same initiative, they will have the chevrons pointing at them as well. And then the last things to note in this screen before we go into a unit activation to start positioning for the first round is the reserve button here. And you can see whenever you look at the top of the screen, that chevron under 16, the white chevron, that is Sarge. If you hover reserve, it will point at 15. And I'm going to go ahead and do it to show that it does not actually go to 15. So it just moves the chevron to show you how many of your units are reserving. The actual turn they will reserve to is a separate thing that we'll go over later once it's more relevant. Oh wow, the Swiftwind literally got to the capture point on the first turn. That's cool. Yeah, Swiftwind scout cars are very, very fast, but they that's probably why we have so much sensor information, actually. So Swiftwind scout cars are literally just sensors. They're sensors that zoom. You can see the one weapon it has is a remote sensor missile. Basically, it's mines that sensor ping anyone that runs over them. It does not do damage. Swiftwind scout cars never do damage, but it is giving us a lot of sensor information. I'm pretty sure that's where it's coming from anyway. Yeah, there it is. C3 slave, UAV, remote sensor dispenser. I am not seeing any kind of... Well, I guess the C3 slave is going to be giving us some information, but... Yeah, basic sensors. I was pretty sure that was where it was coming from. Maybe there's a VTOL or something that has a warfare suite. Well, the tag sprint also has a C3 slave, and C3 is more effective the more there is, so it might just be a full C3 network giving us tons of information. That'd be pretty cool. Oh, also, the red. So, our Vespa Mark II ally here, the reason the Rocket 15s are red is because they're not available. They're either destroyed, or they're out of ammo, or for whatever other reason, they will never fire this mission. Or at least, at present, cannot fire. So if a weapon is jammed, it will also show as red, because it cannot fire. If a weapon system is crit, it will be yellow, showing that it is damaged. But if it's red, it cannot fire. Oh, actually, yeah, that's a point. So you'll notice that we actually have more sensor information on the Woodpecker here than we did whenever it was Sarge's turn. That's because Rusalka's turn is now up. So Rusalka had a different sensor roll than Sarge. At the beginning of every round, a roll is made for every unit on the battlefield to determine what their sensor check result is. The sensor check result is then compared to every single unit, every single enemy unit, to see how much information is known and whether or not they have the no sensors penalty. The worse your sensor roll, the lower your accuracy is going to be, which is part of the reason why I really stress taking tactics as the highest priority. But Rusalka apparently got a very good sensor roll despite the 2 tactics. And you can see exactly what sensor roll they got by hovering the eyeball here. And I say got a really good sensor roll, but -1 total. Huh. In any case, this eyeball here tells you everything about this unit's electronic warfare. So we've got +1 from tactics, +1 from advanced sensors, and our roll was a -3. Our sensor range is 484.5 meters, and a multiplier of 0.95, no info. So, yeah, she actually has no sensors. Which, actually, I think is a thing. You know what? It doesn't really matter whether no sensors on round 1 is a thing or not, because you can't fight in round 1. You can't shoot anyone in round 1, so it doesn't matter. But the visuals range is partially determined by the environment. Like, for example, we're fighting at night, so our visuals range is going to be lower. So we might get the no visuals debuff on our shots. And you can increase your range with things like advanced optics, advanced zoom, and just try to generally negate the no sensors penalty. And then the last thing to note before we go into actually moving our mechs around is these buttons up here. Obviously, the menu. The 3 lines is the menu. Now, if you're new to Roguetech, but you've played the vanilla Battletech experience, you'll notice save game, restart mission are both grayed out, and will be grayed out inside of every mission. The reason why is because when it was possible to save and restart mission in Roguetech, it crashed a lot and could corrupt your save data. And it was just generally a bad time. So rather than trying to troubleshoot it, the modders were like, okay, we're just going to disable it. If you want to restart the mission, you're going to have to go back to the entire, main menu load game screen. Load game here is an option, but it's very, very likely that if you try to load the game from inside of the game, it will actually load vanilla Battletech instead of Roguetech, which is not compatible. So weird things happen. Unless they fixed it, I don't understand why they haven't disabled load game inside of missions as well, but it's worth a try. Just generally, you want to quit to desktop or quit to main menu if you're going to try to reload. Let's see, what else? Arrows. I don't know what they do, honestly. The double chevron there. I don't know if it's a thing that vanilla Battletech does that I just don't remember because it's been so long, or if it might have something to do with I use the combat floating text for my information in the Roguetech mod. There is a console listing. It might be that. I haven't tried the console in a long time because it was, last I tried, very hard on the computer's performance, or it slowed down performance noticeably. And while trying to record, I can't afford to also have something else hogging resources. So, yeah, I had crashes whenever I tried to use the console. You might not, if you're not trying to record while you play. But that's what that button might be. I don't know for sure. And then at long last, there's the withdraw button. If you click withdrawal, you will see this screen. Withdraw bad faith. If you withdraw in bad faith, you will lose reputation, you will not get paid, and you will not get salvage. Additionally, unlike with vanilla Battletech, the mission does not end when you click withdraw. When you click withdraw, a countdown will start. It will tell you how many rounds it will take for Sumair to come scoop you up. And you will just have to survive for that number of rounds until you see a message pop up saying, Sumair's ready to get you out. Do you want to leave now? It's worth noting, and very important to understand, that after you click the withdraw button, not the first one, but this one, even if you then complete the primary objectives, you will still lose the mission with a bad faith result because you started the evac process. So, if there's a chance, especially if it's a pretty good chance, that you're going to be able to complete the mission in the next 5 or 6 rounds, it's not worth trying to withdraw. Unless, well, we'll get to that later. There is a thing that you can do in the Argo to make the withdrawal faster. And I'll show that once we're out of the mission, so I'll put a pin in it, and hopefully I remember when we get back to the Argo so I can go over how to make withdrawal a viable option. Other than just run away, break line of sight, and dance around until Sumair picks you up. Worth noting, we're in a defend base mission, so if we can just run away, break line of sight, and dance around for 5 rounds, then we'll probably be able to complete the mission. So withdrawing in a defend-based mission is basically never a good idea. Might as well just try to do the same thing, but hoping that the buildings survive. In any case, we're going to click cancel because we definitely do not want to withdraw in bad faith. So that is everything that is currently... Oh, almost everything. The resolve bar. If you click on Sarge, that is annoying. Plus resolve. Yeah, so Sarge here has 3 out of 80. You'll see the resolve pop up on the left there. The Mechwarrior gains 1 base resolve each round of combat increased by guts. When a Mechwarrior becomes inspired at 50 resolve stored, they gain a +1 to ECM status and probe results. Or probe rolls. Scion here has 4 resolve right now. Holdra's at 3.
What? No.
Rizalka's at 3, I believe. Yeah. And Tainted Loki is at 4. You may remember, Tainted Loki and Scion have 4 tactics. Oh, actually, Tainted Loki apparently has 5 tactics. I guess the vehicle's giving him a bonus. That's cool. Also, if you hover over the Mechwarriors, it will show the current status of their skills. I do not know why Scion showed 1111. I think it was just a display error. But yeah, so you can look and see. And again, the reason Tainted Loki is showing 4345 is because it appears the vehicle has something that's giving him +1 tactics. So now that we're done with the interface, let's go to the unit interface. So you'll see in the bottom left corner is the minimap. It will show you see the yellow dot and the white lines. That's the camera and the view plane, or the view angle you have. So as I move around the camera, you can see on the minimap. Actually, you might be able to see on the minimap. The camera, the little, like, most of a triangle with the yellow tip is moving around to show exactly what part of the battlefield I'm looking at on my screen. If you hover over the map, it enlarges it a little bit, but yeah, you can also click the X to exit out of it. And I just realized I don't know how to get it back if you do.
Hey.
I've never clicked the X before, so maybe they put it in the settings menu? Maybe? Nope, doesn't look like it. Yeah. Yep. No clue. Wait, actually mod settings maybe. There we go. Yeah, cool. Does that bring it back?
No.
What if I exit out and then come back in?
I'm here.
Huh. Okay, well now I know, and now I can tell you. If you want the minimap, don't click the X. I imagine it'll come back for the next mission, but for now, it seems like, maybe if I resolve?
Sure. Just forget about me.
And wait for everything to move. I'm also fine with resolving because it will let me see where the enemies are positioning. There is a downside to resolving, but or reserving. I'll cover that as soon as I see if the minimap is back. No, it is not. Okay. Cool. So by clicking the X, I have closed out of the minimap for the entire mission. But it's fine, because the minimap's a new feature anyway, and, yeah. Okay. So now, the reason why resolving is not necessarily a great idea. You see here, whenever you hover over the stopwatch, it shows you the initiative breakdown. Now, Rizalka has a 5 hesitation. This hesitation is going to last into the next round. So, that one. That 5 hesitation, that's going to mean their initiative is lower next round. So we kind of have to keep that in mind now. Whereas we have no hesitation on Scion because Scion has not reserved. So that's the downside to reserving. Now, sometimes that's fine. Like this first round, I'm not super worried about acting after the enemies. They do have the light AC2s and light PVCs, which does give better accuracy than standard. But other than that, not super worried about like any kind of alpha strike coming from them. I don't think they're gonna one-shot any of our mechs unless they get a lucky headshot. So now, excuse me, let me take a sip real quick. So now, let's go over all the little symbols underneath the Mechwarriors. The biome is always the first thing next to the initiative number. So here we're seeing that it's a desert and nighttime visibility is reduced. Guarded is the current state that they're in. Because we dropped in a guarded state, you'll see the shield to the right of the health bar. And you can also hover over it here to see 20% damage, or 20% damage reduction against ranged attacks to the front and side. If somebody gets behind you, guarded does nothing. And it does stack with cover, which also doesn't do anything when you're getting shot from behind. And melee attack, it may be a little counterintuitive or not super clear, but what it means by guarded is countered by any melee attack is if you melee attack somebody who is in the guarded state, it will knock them out of the guarded state. And then breaching shot is a special quirk that you can have on various equipment that will let you just not ever have to worry about guarded or cover when you fire a single weapon system. So that does also work with multi-targeting. If you have equipment that lets you target multiple units, a great example is if you have 3 Gauss rifles or 3 PPCs, multi-target and breaching shot, you can then shoot 3 separate individual targets and get breaching shot on all 3 of them. But if you shoot in multiple weapons at the same target, you do not get the benefits of breaching shot. Whew, this is a lot to go over. Entrenched, 50% stability reduction. So if you're entrenched, any damage you take that would cause any stability damage is reduced by half. There's also, I forget what the status is called, but if you're in mud or other, additional stabilizing terrain that makes it harder for you to get knocked down, you will also have a stability damage reduction from that, and that does stack with Entrenched. So, yeah, I think that's all those icons that I covered. Down here at the bottom, we have Attack, which if you click it, you then have the attack option, so you can then click an enemy, and it's not going to work because it's first round, so we can't actually attack. But yeah, that's how that works. You can also use the 1 key. So yeah, the number that appears below the icon, that's the hotkey on the keyboard. So 2 for move, 1 for attack, 3 for sprint, 4 for jump if it's available, if you have jump jets. And so that's how you can quickly switch between them. Until you left click, nothing will happen. So you can just freely go amongst all of them. Just don't left click and you won't accidentally commit to anything. So attacking, we'll get to that in tomorrow's video when we do the actual, first round of shooting at enemies. But move and sprint are similar but different. They both require a path on the ground. And they both are determined by your mech's engine core size, as well as what type of terrain they're running over. The biggest differences between move and sprint is when you move, any stability damage that you have will be reduced. If you sprint, any stability damage you have will stay. So sprinting can be riskier if you've taken any stability damage so far. In addition to that, any shot you take, your accuracy is reduced. If you stand and shoot, if you don't move at all, there is no penalty to your accuracy. If you move and then shoot, you have a penalty of 1 to your accuracy. If you sprint and then shoot, it's a penalty of 2. And if you jump and then shoot, it's a penalty of 3. So it does impact your accuracy, but as you see, whenever I toggle over to sprint, we're getting 6 evasion, or possibly 7 if we run downhill, compared to 5 if we run downhill, or 4 if we don't. It's also worth noting, mobility penalties, for example, rough terrain or moving through water, are different depending on whether you're moving or sprinting. Sprinting through water is very, very ineffective because the penalty is increased so much that you're usually better off just moving because the penalty is not as severe when you move through water compared to when you sprint. Now, obviously, if you have no stability damage and you're not shooting, there's no reason to not sprint through water. But if you have stability damage especially, or if you're shooting, you're generally better off moving than shooting and having maybe 1 less hex of movement. Again, for water. Forests also penalize you more for sprinting than for moving. But I think rough terrain penalizes you more for moving than for sprinting. Don't quote me on that one. And I know that roads are more effective when you're sprinting than when you're moving. So just every terrain type, including the up and downhill modifiers, are different based on whether you're moving or sprinting. But again, the main thing to keep in mind, if everything else I just said completely bewildered, move drops all stability damage and doesn't penalize your accuracy as much. Sprinting goes farther. The end. Jumping, I will be able to show that when we get to one of the units with jump jets. Number 5 here, first aid. So, it is worth noting, you can first aid anytime. If you are bleeding out, so if your Mechwarrior gets injured, depending on what kind of injury they receive, they can get a modifier called bleeding out. You'll see a message that says, blah is bleeding out with X rounds remaining. This will continue to count down until it reaches 0 rounds remaining, eject now or die. And that literally means if you do not eject that turn, they will just die. They will bleed to death. Now, the way you can prevent them from bleeding to death without just ejecting them is to use the first aid skill. This active ability, as it says in the pop-up there, recovers 2 points of lost blood. And it improves panic rolls for 1 turn. So, in order to use it, you have to use it before you move or shoot. And you end your turn, you get the guarded and entrenched statuses, but you can't move. You are stationary, you have no evasion. However, it does let you patch yourself up for 2 points of lost blood. Which means you can slowly walk to the evac point if you first aid, move, first aid, move, first aid, move. But it's also worth noting that if you are bleeding out and you get another injury that also causes blood loss, you could potentially just die. So it's risky to continue fighting while bleeding out and not just punch out. But at the same time, you do have the option to reduce the turns until you bleed out a bit, as long as nothing else comes along and further bleeds you out more than you expected. But, yeah. Also, whenever a Mechwarrior is bleeding out, they're incredibly likely to panic, so the improved panic roll is also very helpful. Careful maneuvers. If you ever end up in a situation where you cannot move, because let's say you dropped on a ridge or a rock, and there just is no path to get down. There's no way to move off of it. You don't have jump jets. You can use careful maneuvers. Careful maneuvers, as far as I understand it, only lets you move 1 hex, but ignores everything. So you can use it to literally walk down a cliff face. It will take you several rounds to get to the bottom of the cliff, and the entire time you will effectively have 0 evasion because you're moving 1 hex per turn. But you can do it. It's mostly used to get out of a situation where you either soft-locked yourself because you need to evac at a point that you can't get to, or if you accidentally dropped a mech on a dead drop where you can't move off of the spot where you dropped. So that's what Careful Maneuvers does. Once you click it and click confirm, you are locked into it. There is no backing out once you click the confirm button. So make sure that you absolutely are intent on using it before you click confirm for Careful Maneuvers. Now, getting off of that, the abilities on 7. So if you push 7, it brings up the ability bar, and you'll notice the ability bar also has numbers underneath it. So at this point, if I push 2, trying to go to move, you'll see it actually selects attack ground. The way you get out of that, first of all, escape out so you don't accidentally attack the ground, and then click the ability button again. I don't know if having a 7th ability would cause there to be a 7, so you wouldn't be able to... Yeah, no, you can't. I just tried. Yeah, you cannot use the hotkey to open... Or you can use the hotkey to open the menu, but not to close the menu. You have to click the ability button to close it. But yeah, so here you have the anti-air stance. So if an enemy airstrike is coming in, this is how you deal with it, which is a very welcome addition, because before there was literally nothing you could do. So I assume, yep, confirm. So if you use the anti-aircraft stance, confirm into it, and this is where the AA modifiers for your weapons comes in to inform you of how effective you will be at dealing with the airstrike, the strafing run that's coming for you. Attack ground, much like any RTS, if you're familiar, lets you tell your unit to shoot their weapons at the ground. Now, if you're using a pinpoint weapon, like an LBX autocannon or a large laser, this does nothing. Or more specifically, it wastes ammo and doesn't hit anything. But if you're using missiles, specifically ammunition with missiles that does area of effect damage, or mines, you can use attack ground to fire on an area, a cluster, what have you, without picking a single particular target. Now, the way, for example, swarm missiles work is if you target a unit and shoot at them, any missile that hits them does damage, and the AoE is, in addition to that, as far as it used to work. Now, mines, you don't ever want to shoot mines directly at an enemy, because if a mine hits the enemy, it'll do usually 1 damage and then not activate and not lay a mine. And the mines always do, well, usually do more than 1 damage, or if they do 1 damage, they usually have an additional effect. So you never want to actually directly shoot mines at a target. You always want to use attack ground when you're laying a minefield. Mortars also have drift, so sometimes it can be very much beneficial to attack ground between some enemies. That way, if it drifts either direction, you still hit something. Whereas if you target specifically one enemy and it drifts away from all the other enemies, you might get very little impact from your mortars. And that's basically the use cases for attack ground. Request hot drop. This is a new one. What is request hot drop? I'm gonna have to look into that. That sounds interesting. I'll have to look into that. Anyway. So here, SWAT and roll and erratic maneuvering. These are how you deal with battle armor. Actually, you know what? I should probably just go over these once there is battle armor and it's relevant. I'm gonna put a pin in those. We'll go over them once we see battle armor. So the future me probably cut out what I was just saying. Yeah, those last 3 are battle armor. For now, whatever. Then we have offensive push and vigilance. Oh, also, in the ability tab is where you'll find things like Warlord. Or if you have things like Warlord, it sometimes will replace Careful Maneuvers or possibly First Aid, and then you'll find those in the ability menu. But moving on, we have offensive push and vigilance. So these are resolve abilities. You spend resolve to use them. Resolve is on a per unit basis, which means if you have 28 resolve on Scion, you can use offensive push and it will not impact the resolve that anyone else has. Meaning you can use some people to vigilance and some people to offensive push and some people to use their active abilities that they have inherently.
I hear you.
I will go over offensive push and vigilance in detail once it's time to use them. But for now, just understand that they are activated by resolve, and until you have enough resolve, they will be grayed out like this, and you will not be able to select them. Then brace is, as the tooltip says, you remove unsteady, end your turn, gain guarded, and entrenched. So, yeah. Oh, that's another difference. So, alright, I'm gonna start repositioning. We're going to go ahead and get the... So the... Oh man, I still have to go over... Okay, I'll go over the weapons when we're actually about to shoot somebody. The sprint option, which we're going to sprint over here... Oh, then again, we don't really want to give up our high ground. Oh man, rough terrain makes you unsteady. We'll go over that next time. So, we're going to move.
Uh-huh.
I need to turn off the dynamic camera because that takes too long. Yeah, so you'll notice we moved, and after moving, we can now brace. So we still get the 4 evasion from moving, and we now have guarded and entrenched on our bushwhack. Meanwhile, as soon as it's our turn again, short version, sprinting doesn't. Sprinting, you cannot brace afterwards. That's the other big difference that I'm just so... It's second nature to me, so it didn't even occur to me to say it out loud. But, yeah, that's also a pretty big difference. So we could move for 5 evasion and brace with the Phoenix Hawk, but I think I am actually going to sprint for 7 here. Yeah.
All right, full speed.
Not getting hit is always better than taking reduced damage. And you'll see now we have the done button instead of the brace button. So that's the other thing that I just completely blanked on because I just know, and it's not something I've given conscious thought to for literally years. Also, we're going to move the stealth into the forest and brace. So we'll have 20% damage reduction from the forest as well as 20% from cover. I mean, from braced. That is additive, so we are taking 40% less damage. If you have bulwark, it's an additional 20%. They all are additive, so you can have 60% additive. Then any other damage reduction sources you have are multiplicative, so if you have an additional 10% from something else, it's not an actual additional 10%, it's a percentage multiplication thing. We'll go over that when we have other stuff to increase damage reduction. But for now, we're going to brace.
Orders.
Tainted Loki. I'm pretty sure brace does... Maybe it does now. I don't know. Let's test it. So we're going to move and brace with our tank, and it shouldn't. It never used to give... Yeah, it doesn't. So tanks cannot gain damage reduction, and they don't take stability damage at all, so the entrenched doesn't matter. But they do not get the damage reduction, so there's literally never a reason to move with the tank instead of sprinting, unless you're taking a shot and don't want the accuracy penalty of sprinting.
Hey.
Rizalka... I could have demonstrated the jump jet interface with the stealth, right? Yeah.
What? No.
Okay, I guess I'll do that tomorrow. We're already almost at an hour, so at long last, you can see we're getting 9 evasion with our Locust moving through water. We're getting 10 evasion with our Locust moving uphill to high ground. We can get 11 evasion with our Locust running uphill, or 10 evasion running in the water. That is insane, and I love it. And that's why we're bringing Rusalka on every mission as long as we're dropping a 20-tonner. But for now, again, because I can brace afterwards, I am going to move and brace. Or am I? Am I going to move? Okay. So, the two thoughts here is if I move forward, we're going to be the highest proximity, or the closest proximity to the enemies, so they likely would focus fire. At the very least, if they have mostly short-range weapons, they would likely focus fire at the Locust. That said, while we do have a lot of evasion, we don't have much in the way of damage, of armor. So, moving for 9 evasion and bracing, while it would be good protection, would it be good enough? Of course, then again, if they're not shooting at the Locust, they will be shooting at something else. And I would, again, just as I said at the very beginning, I would rather lose the Locust than lose anything else. So we are going to... Since it's just 1 evasion... I think I am going to move and brace. Not so much for the damage reduction, because the 20% damage reduction doesn't really matter when a single shot is probably going to take all your armor off. But more so for the entrenched, because that means that we are less likely to take stability damage, so we're more likely to be able to keep our evasion. Because if you do get knocked unsteady, if you take too much stability damage and reach your stability threshold, you lose all of your evasion. So let's get some entrenched going so that we don't lose our incredible 9 evasion. And that concludes the first round. So now, I just realized that VTOLs are probably going to go before my units. Nope, wait. Holger's got a 17. Okay. So we're going to stop it here. And tomorrow we're going to take part in the first actual round of combat. Now, it's worth noting, this is a change that it kind of like a fix that they did, because when they first implemented the first round is no fighting, the reinforcements, the timer for the missions would still tick. So you would basically have 1 less round to take care of the Vanguard before the reinforcements arrived. But as you can see, it still says rounds 10, so that's fixed, which is awesome. But for now, that's been your episode of Roguetech for the day. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, have a good one.